Hello everyone! Thank you for checking out this tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing off one of my favorite art mediums, the watercolor pencil. I'm using a page from my multimedia coloring book series for this example, but you can sketch out anything you'd like to paint using a regular pencil. Make sure to use very thick paper or paper labeled for multimedia use, since we'll be applying water to your illustration at the end of the tutorial to experience the full potential of watercolor pencils. As you can see, starting out, we're just going to be gently shading in areas of color, using a light touch, and making sure to leave blank the white areas for where I'd like to show off patches of snow. Start small. After all, you can always add more color later, but it's very tricky to remove color once it's down on the paper. I'm using both shades of green for the trees here, and just a touch of blue in the snow to give it a nice layered look. Let's use this deeper green for the darker branches, and the lighter green where the sunlight can reach through the snow. I think I'll leave this area under the snow as a rocky landscape, but I'll blend in a little blue so that it isn't plain brown. Colors in nature are rarely isolated, so try experimenting with blending in unique colors to add additional depth and dimension to your colors. For the sliver of sky off to the right here, let's make it a beautiful gradient hue, starting from yellow and blending it up into magenta pink. Slow and steady, using a light touch so the colors blend as seamlessly as possible into each other. Yeah, I like it! Let's add a touch of blue at the very top here for even more color. And now for my favorite part, let's color in the fox. I'm going to lay down some brown in this lovely orange color, layering up the fur as I go. I'll leave his tail tip untouched to make sure to give him that foxy look, and leave his belly and mask white also. Let's add a little more brown into the feet. And for my pencil strokes, I'm following the direction of the fur. Even though it won't matter much once water's applied, it's still a good habit to practice as a colored pencil technique. Here, I'm going back in over the orange with a touch of yellow to lighten up the fur near the top where the sunlight hits. It's a nice effect that makes our colors pop. Now he's looking like a proper trickster. I wonder what he's leaping for, in the snow off of the rocks here. Maybe he sees a little vole or mouse sneaking around in the snow. Now it's time to grab some water and one of your paintbrushes. Since my canvas size is fairly small, I'm going to start on the details here using my small round brush. I'm gently wetting my brush, just damp, not soaking, and blending out the colors of the branches here. One of the tricks you can use to create better blending effects is to slightly wet a white area of the paper and gently blend the pigment up into that area instead of pushing the color up onto dry paper. This allows the bleed to flow naturally and can create quite a nice look. I'm using this technique here to soften the areas of blue shadowing on the ground snow. Using my larger flat brush, I'll go ahead and blend the sky area with water. Be very careful when applying water to these larger areas. You won't want to scrub at the paper too forcefully, as harsh rubbing with a paintbrush can eventually create abrasive damage to the paper's surface, even on good multimedia paper. By going over these wet areas with a dry brush, I can create this cross-hatching effect using the texture of the bristles in an otherwise texturally plain area. Neat, right? Here, I'm putting the finishing touches on my fox using a damp brush to blend the pigment, creating that really wonderful watercolor look. I'm using a very light touch here and following the flow of the fur with each stroke. As you can see, picking up a little bit of the pigment from the page with your damp brush and applying it like paint can be a really lovely fur effect. I'm using my flat brush for this, and the bristles naturally segment out nicely for the painterly look. Once I get into the details, however, I'll switch back to my normal round brush for optimal control. Now, this step is completely optional and requires a few extra materials. I sometimes like to use pens, pencils, or acrylic paint to add a little finishing touches to my watercolor pencil illustrations. Here, I've decided to go in with my paintbrush and a dab of white acrylic paint to fill in some of the white areas that were accidentally filled in while I was painting. It's a great way to cover up slips of the pencil or brush and fine-tune areas where you'd like to add a little extra polish. Here, I'll dab a little bit of white onto the snow in both the trees and the rocks, with a little touch around the fox's throat and nose. Thank you for joining me as we learned how to use watercolor pencils. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned something along the way. You have so much creativity to offer the world, and I'm proud of you for taking the time to learn a new medium. Cheers!